Some deaths don't surprise you. Others hit you like a door being kicked open in the middle of the night. Kristoff St. John's death was the second kind. Sudden, violent, in silence, and far too familiar for anyone who has ever watched a black man carry more weight than his heart was built for. Before the world lost him, Hollywood tried to claim him. The young and the restless called him Neil Winters, a role that wrapped him in respectability and class. But when a man shines that brightly for 27 years, you forget to ask what it costs to hold that kind of light. And the truth is painful. Kristoff didn't die from fame or addiction or scandal. He died from something much more human, much more dangerous. A broken heart that never healed after the day his son left this world. So let me ask you this. What happens when the strongest man in the room is the one breaking quietly in the corner? What happens when grief sits beside you, eats with you, sleeps next to you, and refuses to let go? This is not just the story of an actor. This is the story of a father who couldn't outrun his pain, and a warning about the wounds black men carry in silence until it kills them. Kristoff St. John did not arrive in this world gently. He was born into a fracture, a split right down the center of his family the moment his mother's parents saw his skin. She was white and Polish. His father was a proud black man, and in their world, that child was a battle no one wanted to fight. So his father did what fathers do when love is bigger than fear. He took his son in his arms and walked away from anyone who couldn't see his child as a blessing. But what Kristoff didn't know then was this. His life would be shaped by absences long before it was shaped by fame. He grew up in Connecticut first, then California, in homes that felt temporary. In a world his father kept rebuilding from scratch. His father was an artist, a militant spirit, a man who stood too tall and too black for the comfort of white institutions. When Hollywood blacklisted him, he took that broken gate and handed the key to his son instead. Kristoff didn't get a childhood. He got training. He got expectation. They lived in the mountains sometimes, far from noise and neighbors. No meat, no cartoons, no normal. His father and stepmother were deep into the hippie movement, into spirituality, into raw food and raw living, into raising a child who was supposed to become more than his environment. But the truth was simpler. Kristoff was lonely, and hunger has a way of driving a boy into trouble. He stole lunches at school because he wanted something warm, something fried, something real. And for that, he was beaten by other kids who didn't understand that hunger isn't theft. It's survival. Yet, even in that chaos, he found something steady, acting. He watched his father rehearse lines, shape characters, shift expressions, and it became a language he understood better than anything else. A place he could exist without being punished for it. By 7 years old, he was auditioning. By 10, he was booking roles on shows America loved. He landed That's My Mama, Happy Days, Big John, Little John. He was moving fast, chasing opportunities other black boys never even got a chance to see. But behind every early success was a truth he carried quietly. He was learning how to be someone else before he ever learned how to be himself. When he played young Alex Haley in Roots, The Next Generations at 12, America saw talent. What they didn't see was the weight he felt knowing he was stepping into a legacy built from chains, pain, and survival. And still, he carried it with grace. Because that is what black boys are taught to do. Carry everything with grace, even when it hurts. Then came the strangest chapter of his childhood. A trip to India. A supposed holy man. A cult disguised as spirituality. Kristoff learned quickly that not every adult who claims divine power holds divine intentions. And that truth would follow him, shaping his distrust, shaping his strength, shaping the quiet way he defended the people he loved. By the time he reached his teens, he was no longer a child. He was an actor with credits, a son with scars, a boy raised by a father who believed he was destined for greatness. Whether Kristoff wanted that destiny or not, he didn't know it yet. But every chapter of struggle was preparing him for the role that would define him for the rest of his life. Neil Winters, a character who gave him stability, identity, and a place in black television history. By the time Kristoff St. John stepped onto the set of The Young and the Restless in 1991, he wasn't a newcomer. He was a survivor, a young black man who had already lived through abandonment, isolation, Hollywood politics, and a childhood spent learning how to perform before he ever learned how to breathe. But this role changed everything. Neil Winters wasn't written as a stereotype. He wasn't criminal, comedic relief, or collateral damage. He was corporate, educated, respected. A black man in a suit, not chains. In the early 90s, that image mattered more than people. Now remember, soap operas were a world dominated by white families, white stories, white romance, white wealth. But when Kristoff appeared on screen, something shifted. Black viewers leaned in. They saw a man who looked like their brothers, uncles, fathers, co-workers, a man navigating power without being stripped of his humanity. And the chemistry between Kristoff and Victoria Rao, who played Drusilla, was immediate, electric, cultural. They weren't just a soap opera couple. They were the black soap opera couple. Neil and Drew became a phenomenon. They made The Young and the Restless must-watch television for millions of black households who had never cared about the show before. For daytime TV, this was revolutionary. Black actors weren't allowed to carry storylines for decades. Yet Kristoff carried entire arcs romance, corporate battles, family struggles, and did it with a quiet charm that made him unforgettable. And the awards followed. 10 NAACP Image Awards, 2 Emmy wins, 11 Emmy nominations, a level of recognition few black soap actors had ever reached. What made his success remarkable wasn't just the number of years he stayed, it was who he became on that set. He wasn't just an actor, he was the anchor, the steady heartbeat of the show. The mentor to younger black actors like Shamar Moore, who openly said that Kristoff paved the way for him. Behind the camera, Kristoff was growing too. He wanted to direct. He wanted to write. He wanted to create the kinds of stories Hollywood never handed to men like him. Producers trusted him. Cast members adored him. Fans considered him family. But what no one knew was this. Even at his peak, Kristoff was carrying a weight that success couldn't lift. A quiet sadness. A lingering ache from a childhood shaped by instability and a father's unyielding expectations. Still, every morning he walked onto that set with professionalism, grace, and a smile that hid more than it revealed. Because in Black Hollywood, excellence is often the mask you wear to survive. And for nearly 3 decades, he wore that mask beautifully, flawlessly. So flawlessly that no one saw the cracks forming underneath. No one knew the storm that was coming. No one knew how one event, one devastating phone call would break a man the world believed was unbreakable. The fall never begins loudly. It begins in quiet rooms, in slow hours, in the places where no one is watching. For Kristoff St John, the breaking point arrived in the form of a phone call, the kind of call no parent survives intact. His son, Julian, just 24 years old, was gone, dead inside a psychiatric hospital where he was supposed to be protected. A place that promised 15-minute checks, careful supervision, and safety. Promises that collapsed the moment staff walked away from their duty and left Julian alone with the very thing he had tried to use before. A plastic bag, the same kind they swore to remove. When Kristoff heard the news, something inside him shattered. Not cracked, shattered. And the pieces never came back together. Julian had battled schizophrenia since 13. Voices, paranoia, despair. He self-medicated with drugs because he didn't understand the storm in his own mind. Kristoff didn't understand it either. And in the black community, pain like that is often dismissed as a phase, a weakness, a thing to pray away instead of a condition that needs care. So, when Julian died, the guilt hit Kristoff like a tidal wave he could not outrun. He blamed the hospital. He blamed the system. Most of all, he blamed himself. He spiraled. Alcohol became a shield, then a crutch, then a weapon. He drank to numb the memories. He drank to silence the guilt. He drank because every time he closed his eyes, he saw his son standing in a doorway asking for help that came too late. By the anniversary of Julian's death, Kristoff was hallucinating. He sent photos of himself holding a gun to his head. He said he wanted to join his son. Police placed him on psychiatric hold, took his weapons, and tried to keep him alive. But grief this deep doesn't disappear in 72 hours. He tried to work. He tried to smile. He tried to show up for fans and castmates because that was the only identity he had left. But the man people saw on television was no longer the man who went home at night, behind closed doors. He was crumbling. In 2019, the last downward slide came fast. Kristoff checked into a mental health facility in Pasadena. He was supposed to stay 2 weeks. The hospital released him in a few days without telling anyone who loved him. He was still suicidal when he walked out the door. Still drinking. Still lost. 2 days later, he called Mia. His voice was slurred, broken. He said Julian was at the door. He said Julian was coming to take him on a walk, and in that moment, Mia knew he was leaving the world. She called a friend to rush over, but grief always moves faster than help. Kristoff was found on the floor between a couch and a coffee table, surrounded by empty vodka bottles, alone. His heart finally gave out. The coroner called it hypertrophic heart disease with alcohol as a contributing factor, but everyone who knew him said the same thing. He didn't die from a bad heart. He died from a broken one. When the news of Kristoff St. John's death reached the public, America paused. Not because he was a scandal, not because he was a headline, but because he was a presence, a quiet constant in millions of homes for nearly 3 decades. Black households, especially, felt the loss deeply. For so long, daytime television had been a place where black faces appeared rarely, and black stories almost never held center stage. Kristoff broke that pattern, and in doing so, he became part of the daily rhythm of families who never expected to see themselves reflected in that world. America talked about Neil Winters, the character, but the world grieved Kristoff the man, a black father mourning a son in a country where mental illness is often shamed, misunderstood, or ignored. A black artist carrying trauma that success could not erase. A black man whose pain was visible only when it became unbearable. News outlets revisited his interviews, noticing the cracks in his voice, the times his smile faltered, the grief he tried to swallow. Looking back, it was all there. We just didn't know how to read it. And Hollywood took a breath too. Because Kristoff wasn't just another actor, he was a reminder of how many people in the industry are hurting quietly while the world praises their strength. His death forced conversations about mental health that the entertainment world had avoided for far too long. Within the black community, his story hit even harder, because black men are taught to be unbreakable, to carry everything without asking for help, to bury pain until it becomes part of their body. Kristoff's tragedy exposed that illusion for what it is, deadly. His son's death, his downward spiral, his cries for help, in his final hours. These weren't just personal tragedies. They were symptoms of a system that fails to protect those who need protection most. A system that dismisses mental health until it becomes a funeral. But even in death, Kristoff opened doors. His family used their grief to raise awareness for mental illness. Fans began speaking more openly about depression and loss. And the young and the restless aired a tribute that reminded America of the man behind the character, not just the character behind the man. Kristoff St. John didn't leave the world silently. He left a question echoing behind him. How many more black fathers, sons, brothers, and artists are breaking quietly, unseen, unheard? And are we finally ready to listen? Some stories end loudly. Others end with a man lying quietly in his living room, surrounded by the echoes of a life that once held so much light. Kristoff St. John's story ended that way. Not with applause, not with cameras, but with a silence heavy enough to break the people who loved him. Yet, endings do not erase impact. They reveal it. They show us the places where a person's life carved a space in the world. Kristoff left behind more than a character on television. He left behind a legacy of representation in a genre that rarely made room for black men. For 27 years, he showed America a different kind of black masculinity. Gentle, educated, vulnerable, human. He left behind a documentary that dared to explore spiritual manipulation and generational pain. He left behind a community of actors who learned the craft by watching him. And he left behind a family still piecing themselves together after losing not one, but 2 bright spirits. But most of all, he left a lesson, a hard one, a necessary one. Grief is not weakness. Depression is not a flaw. Silence is not strength. Too many black men grow up believing they have to endure pain quietly, carry trauma privately, and keep breathing even when the weight becomes unbearable. Kristoff's story, his rise, his collapse. His final text to the woman he once loved is a reminder of what happens when someone runs out of places to put their pain. Some stories end without closure, but dignity does not need applause. To anyone who has ever carried grief alone, to any parent who has buried a child, to any man who has felt the world demand strength when he had none left, this story is for you. We see you, we hear you, and your pain deserves more than silence. If Kristoff's life touched you, tell us how. Share your memory. Share your thoughts. Share the name of the loved one you're remembering tonight. We read every word,